evening, I'm Hibak Ahmed and this is an edition of news from Dalsan TV English broadcast with the latest news from Somalia and across the world. And these are some of our top news headlines. SNA soldiers in liberated Masjid al-Gadoud received supplies donated by Somali diaspora in US. Al-Shabaab gunmen attack military base in central Somalia. And President Hassan Sheikh joins world leaders in Egypt Sharm el-Sheikh for UN Climate Summit. Somali National Army troops stationed in Masjid al-Gadoud have today received new supplies aimed at helping them as they continue to advance to other strategic towns. The leaders of the region visited the troops who recently liberated the village from the hands of the Somali militant group Al-Shabaab. The donation, which included medical supplies, food and non-food items, were handed over to the leadership of the Somali army and allied local clan militia helping the Somali government.
Soldiers in the front line fighting to control their positions in newly liberated Masjid al-Gadoud town have received new supplies aimed at helping them continue resisting Al-Shabaab, which was removed from the area after 15-year control. The donations, which included camels, food and non-food items, were donated by the Somali diaspora living in the United States. The Federal Parliament representative for the area, Yusuf Mahmoud Yusuf, thanked the diaspora community for spearheading efforts in supporting the Somali army and Maoist militia. The legislature lauded the Somali army and the government-allied militia for undertaking offensive operations aimed at weeding out the network from Somalia. He said the supplies will help his military respond urgently to the emergencies and support local communities in newly liberated areas.
This is just the beginning. More support from the diaspora is coming. This is just from the Minnesota. More help is coming from our brothers and sisters in the diaspora.
The governor of Middle Shabelle region, Ahmed Meire Makaran, led military and other senior officials of the Somali government in receiving the donation from the diaspora. The governor has appealed for help to respond to the civilian population who are lacking basic human needs like health care and education.
Waa u baahannahay dadku inay sidaas u soo dhiiradaan ciidamada iyo shacabka oo iskaashahayo iyo dawladda iyo shacabka iyo ciidamadooda dhan isla socdo.
We want to encourage our patriots to rally behind this cause aimed at supporting those in the front lines. The government and the Somali people have all unanimously decided to liberate themselves from the hands of the militants, a reality that can be achieved if we all come together.
Masjid al-Gadoud has been a front line between Somali forces who have instituted a forward operating base and Al-Shabaab, which has been controlling the town. Hundreds of militants were killed in the operation to flush out the group which has besieged governments in Mogadishu for close to 15 years. The successful offensive follows recent military advancements by the Somali army in pursuit of Al-Shabaab to remove them from parts of central and southern Somalia. The liberation of the latest town came just days after Somalia's government said the military forced Al-Shabaab out of 30 villages in clashes this month that killed more than 200 militants. Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud responded to the deadly siege by announcing a total war against the militant. Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud responded to the recent deadly siege by Al-Shabaab militant by announcing a total war against the organization. The Somali government has issued an urgent plea for international help for wounded victims of the devastating car bombings at the weekend that claimed the lives of 100 people. The attack tested the government's ability to secure the conflict-worn nation, including the capital, of nearly 2.5 million people. Al-Shabaab fighters have stepped up their attacks in Somalia since President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud was elected in May and vowed an all-out war on the Islamists.
marxaladuu ka guurayaa muddo uu ku soo jiray marxalad kale uu guurayaa marxalad dhib iyo qahar iyo karaamo dil iyo caqiidadii iyo cibaadadii ummadda ay lahayd oo lagu cayaaro qarannimadii iyo ummaddan ummadnimadeedii oo maxaan ku rahaa suxun loola dhaqmo ayaan ka guuraynaa.
Suspected Al-Shabaab fighters on Monday attacked a Somali military base in the central Galgaduud region, Dalsan TV has confirmed through sources within the Defense Ministry. The army repulsed the attack on the base housing national and local troops in Qayyib and village captured from Al-Shabaab last week.
At least 10 soldiers were killed when Somalia's Al-Shabaab militant assaulted a military base in central Galgaduud region on Monday. A military officer said days after the government forces said they had regained control of the area. The army eventually pushed the militant out of the base in Qayyib, a village captured from Al-Shabaab last week, according to the Defense Ministry spokesperson Abdullahi Ali Anod. One car bomb hit military truck guarding the base entrance while the other was blown up outside, he said. In a statement, Al-Shabaab spokesperson Abdulaziz Abu Musab said the group launched the assault in Qayyib using suicide car bomb before its fighters attacked from different directions. The statement from Al-Shabaab claimed to have killed 37 soldiers and stole weapons as well as military vehicles. The government's and Al-Shabaab's casualties number often differ. Government forces supported by clan militias have made a number of battlefield gains against Al-Shabaab in the last 3 months, regaining territory long held by the group. In response, Al-Shabaab killed at least 120 people in twin car bombs at the Education Ministry in the capital Mogadishu on October 29th, the deadliest blast in 5 years. Over 300 others are nursing injuries at various hospitals in Mogadishu, while the most critical ones have been airlifted abroad for specialized treatment. The Al-Qaeda-linked group has killed tens of thousands since 2006 in its fight to overthrow Somalia's Western-backed central government and implement its interpretation of Islamic Sharia. Its fighters were driven out of Mogadishu in 2011 by the AU peacekeeping forces. But it still controls large areas of Somalia's countryside and has stepped up attacks since President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud took office in May and pledged an all-out war against the group. The group usually targets busy traffic intersections, hotels, and military bases in the capital and other cities in Somalia. On one hand, the Somali government is fighting Al-Shabaab, but is also grappling with a devastating drought that has driven around 1 million people from their homes and left the country on the verge of famine, according to the United Nations.
The government has frozen the bank accounts of entities and individuals it suspects of financing Al-Shabaab activities in the Mogadishu. The move is designed to choke the flow of money to the Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab. The Somali government has blocked Al-Shabaab's financial bank accounts in Somalia, both through remittance companies and national banks. There have been a similar crackdown on the suspected financiers and money launderers of the group in the UK and US, where the governments have adopted strict money laundering laws, making it difficult for banks to deal with them. Deputy Minister of Information Abdurrahman Yusuf Al-Adala, while addressing members of the Somali diaspora in Sweden, said the federal government received over 10,000 tips from people regarding money transfers to Al-Shabaab.
inay khawaarijta lacag siiyaan taasoo dhibaato weyn u keentay khawaarijta saameyn xun ku yeelatay waxa kale oo wasaaradda cadaaladdu ay amar ka soo saartay nootayooyinka kala wareejiya badeecooyinka la kala iibsado oo la aaminsan yahay in qaar ka mid oo ay ahaayeen aaladaha ay khawaarijtu u isticmaalayeen inay lacag badan ku soo xareeyaan.
The government said it is part of their decision to suffocate the organization's financial resources. However, the government did not say which financial institutions the militants used to process their transactions, but noted that their accounts contained a large amount of money. They also said many prominent business community members had followed the government's directions and stopped paying extortion fees to the group. The Somali government has in recent days accelerated efforts aimed at sealing loopholes in the financial sector often exploited by the Islamist group Al-Shabaab, which is fighting to topple the government. The government has provided the necessary tools to detect and disrupt partners of financing associated with Al-Qaeda and global terrorist networks. This includes the strengthening of institutions like Financial Reporting Center (FRC) in Somalia, which regulates and is set to report on any suspicious money circulating. The center was established through the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Act 2016 to operate as a national central agency that is responsible for the receipt, analysis, and appropriate dissemination of all information relating to money laundering and terrorism financing. The Immigration and Naturalization Directorate, the Ministry of Aviation and Transportation, and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, which are important institutions of compliance, have been asked to immediately provide the necessary tools to detect and disrupt those patterns. The UN panel of experts report on Somalia earlier this year said Al-Shabaab has about 100 checkpoints throughout the country where they impose taxes on trucks transporting goods. The Mogadishu-based Hiral Institute think tank estimates Al-Shabaab earns enough to spend $24 million per year on weapons. Security experts say a crackdown on terrorism funding would mark a departure from Somalia's previous government, which focused more on fighting political battles. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is among world leaders of the UN's COP27 climate summit, which kicked off on Sunday in Egypt. The President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and a delegation he led have arrived in Egypt to attend the International Conference of Climate of the World. The head of state arrived in Egypt's Red Sea city of Sharm el-Sheikh on Monday to attend the UN Climate Summit on the Climate of the World. The President and the Somali experts on climate who accompany will attend the COP27 conference alongside the other leaders of the world. The Somali government said it will deliver the changes of the climate that has affected the Somali people and the plans to mitigate recurring droughts, famine, and floods. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and other world leaders will be attending the summit from November 6th to 18th. The summit began with a speech by COP26 President Alok Sharma to mark the formal handover to Egypt. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres welcomed several leaders to participate in the global event, including UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, French President Emmanuel Macron, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, Bulgarian President Rumen Radev, and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The summit is also being attended by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who arrived in Egypt on Sunday for his first visit since 2018.
Gives me big hope for this continent and for upcoming.
Egypt and Ethiopia are locked in a years-long dispute over a multi-billion dam project being built on the Blue Nile, a main tributary of the Nile River, which Cairo views as an existential threat to its water share. Some 110 heads of state and government are expected to participate. Some 110 heads of state and government are expected to participate in 2 days of talks, with the notable absence of Chinese leader Xi Jinping, whose country is the world's top emitter of greenhouse gases. US President Joe Biden, whose country ranks second on the top polluters list, will join COP27 later this week after midterm elections on Tuesday that could put Republicans hostile to international action on climate change in charge of Congress. On Sunday, the heads of developing nations won a small victory when delegates agreed to put the controversial issue of money for loss and damage on the summit agenda. The United States and the European Union have dragged their feet on the issue for years, fearing it would create an open-ended reparations framework. But European Commission Vice President Frans Timmermans welcomed the inclusion of loss and damage, tweeting that the climate crisis has impacts beyond what vulnerable countries can shoulder alone. Rich nations will also be expected to set a timetable for the delivery of $100 billion per year to help developing countries green their economies and build resilience against future climate change. The UN Climate Change Conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, has been asked to shift the world towards implementation of previously agreed plans to tackle humanity's greatest challenge. Simon Seal, the new Executive Secretary of the UN Climate Convention, said at the opening of COP27.
Friends, today a new era begins, and we begin to do things differently. Paris gave us the agreement. Katowice and Glasgow gave us the plan. Sharm el-Sheikh shifts us to implementation. No one can be a mere passenger on this journey. This is a signal that times have changed. We will be holding people to account, be they presidents, prime ministers, or CEOs, an accountability chief, if you may, because our policies, our businesses, our infrastructure, our actions, be they personal or public, must be aligned with the Paris Agreement and with the Convention.
Regarding sub-item 8F,
we must demonstrate this transformational shift to implementation, putting negotiations into concrete actions. Every corner of human activity must align with our Paris commitment of pursuing efforts to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Let's be encouraged by the strides that certain sectors are making on this, and let's look closer at how the global financial architecture can be made fit for purpose in line with the Paris commitments. We must cement progress on these critical work streams: mitigation, adaptation, finance, and crucially, loss and damage. We need to enable enhanced finance to flow to addressing impacts. What is said in these negotiating rooms has to be reflected in the urgency of what is happening outside.
And those are some of our top stories for this hour. This is Dalsan TV English broadcast with me, Hibak Ahmed. Till we meet again, enjoy the rest of your viewing.